So let me tell you oh my gosh, last time Denise was here, you you all were sending messages, we want the power to face, why don't you talk about it? So very kindly, Denise has agreed and she is back with us. So very warm welcome to you as well. Well, to discuss this and explore many, many, many other points about the power to face, we have with us a fabulous speaker who is now based in south of France and joining us from there. Denise is a writer and broadcaster and very, very inspiring and powerful yogi. What I really find special about her is her clarity of thought, her powerful intellect, and the deep authenticity and warmth with which she interacts with everyone. Over to you, Denise. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And it's really good to be here with everyone. Thank you, Madhavi. And the power to face. Well, some of you who have been studying with all of us the practice and knowledge of Raj Yoga are aware of many of the things I'm going to be talking about today. And those of you who are new, this might be quite different material. But in the study that we had this morning, every morning we do our study together. And one of the things that was in there is very particularly relevant to this subject of the power to face. Now, Raj Yoga is mentioned in the scripture of India, which is called the Bhagavad Gita. A very, very famous scripture, which I think everyone has heard of, but not very many people have read it because, well, it's in Sanskrit and it's very, very deep and complicated, but it's something that I've studied a lot. And the study that we do in Raj Yoga is connected in with the Bhagavad Gita in many, many ways. So one of the things that was pointed up today is that the hero of the Bhagavad Gita is a character by the name of Arjuna. And he is having a conversation with God, and he's very argumentative and he doesn't agree with the things that he's hearing. But at the same time, he wants to listen. So it's a kind of ambivalent relationship. And I think many of us have an ambivalent relationship with God, an ambivalent relationship with life, an ambivalent relationship with truth. And so it's quite pertinent. And one of the scenes is that Arjuna wanted to have a vision of God, because if he didn't have a vision, then he wouldn't believe. So he had a vision and he couldn't stand it because it was, he was seeing this light which was brighter than 1,000 suns, and he couldn't bear it. And in our study today, it was explaining what this really is. And I think very few people have ever thought that it might not have been a light that was too bright to look at, but a different kind of light. And that light was the light of information. Knowledge is said to be light. You get enlightened when you have some information. So the information that was given was unbearable. And this is what I want to talk about today. There are some things that are going on in the world today that anyone would classify as unbearable. In fact, if you look at the news, you probably turn it off fairly quickly because so much of it is unbearable. And yet there it is. And if you look at the things like Netflix and Amazon pictures and videos and all of this, most of the things that go by entertainment are unbearable, unbearably violent, unbearably abusive. And this is what we're surrounded with. And we have things in our lives which are personal and also can be unbearable. Sometimes you may have some problem with your health and you go to the doctor and he says, well, we have to check this out. We'll go to the specialist, and the specialist says, well, the good news is so-and-so, and the bad news is you have only a few weeks to live, something like that. So we can get unbearable news. I'm in France, and today in the news there was an unbearable story of a little girl, aged 12, who was viciously murdered in Paris yesterday and packed in a box and left in the courtyard of her apartment. And the whole country is appalled by how this little child was so viciously slaughtered. It doesn't make any sense. France is also a place where, in the world of literature, they have a big school of thought about the absurd, that there are many things going on in life which are absurd. And when you experience something to be absurd, that's also called unbearable. And in the last couple of days, there has also been the awards of the literary prize. A very interesting point about this, that what are the upcoming writers of the world today writing about? And all of the candidates were writing about this topic. What is the point of individual existence? That's a very, very big subject and a very scary subject. But it does happen to people when you are faced with something absurd, something unbearable, something that doesn't make any sense. Then, of course, you can't face it. But this is this topic that is being taken up, so that life at the moment has got this ingredient of unbearableness. The number of people who are displaced through wars, through climate change, it's just incredible. And the huge, gigantic numbers of people who are being very severely affected by the financial situation in the world today. They do not think they can make it through the winter. So all of this is the sort of thing we have to face. So returning for a moment to this aspect of the teachings that we were studying in our class in the morning, the point that was so difficult for the hero Arjuna to handle was that everything is destined. Now, if you have a great and beautiful destiny, you're really happy about that. But if you say everything is destined, and in that collective word, everything, you put in all the horrible things that are going on in the world today as a general aspect, and also in your own personal lives and in those of the people around you, and you say, this is destined. How do I compute this idea? We generally believe that everything is free choice, and that's bad enough. There are people who choose to do things which are absurd, unbearable, incomprehensible, and there are things that happen to people that we say, what is the cause, you see? People believe that nothing can happen without a cause. And so they look to the cause. And this is why there is this concept of justice. If something happened to someone, then who's to blame? Who is looking to find out who's to blame for whatever bad thing is going on. Climate change. The focus is this is human-induced, but some of it is, but some of it isn't. And so when something is not human-induced, clearly, like things that are storms happening in the sun, how could that be human-induced? People can't really lay the blame on humans for looking at the sun in the wrong way or something like this. So there are many things happening for which you cannot find anyone to put the blame on. People blame the governments, they blame the industries, they blame the corporations, they blame this country or that country, but then look at it in the light of it is destined. And what should we do with this idea of things being destined? It's a very, very subtle and deep thing to understand. So stay with me on this. On the one hand, everything is destined, so we have to face that. On the other hand, we have free will. And yet so few people, if they are really honest with themselves, can say that what they're doing is entirely of their own free will, because most of the things that we do are reactions. So something happens, we react to it, and then it has to be said that you were under the influence of something that you experienced, and so you're not all that free. When you study meditation, why do you study meditation? What's the purpose of all of this? Well, ultimately, it is to be free. So how do you put together the power to face, which is one of the powers that we learn about, the power to face, but the power to face together with all the things that are happening which are classified as destined, predestined, and then you are there coming to terms with and having to face the fact that you're not as free as you think. So we have to deal with this. And I think this is what the writers are trying to work with. This very, very difficult question of what is the point? What is the point of life? What is the point of my life? What is the purpose of my life? Can I have a purpose if my life is meaningless, or if things are too difficult, they're unbearable? Should I just end it all? Is that a solution? Not. Of course, in spirituality, one of the things that we do learn about is that every human being is a spiritual being, a soul. Every soul is eternal and immortal. And every soul is individual. And you have your own individual role to play in this world. And there are things that you do and things that happen to you that you say, what did I do to deserve this? And then very often the answer to that, it will be said, well, you must have done something to deserve it, because there is the law of karma, and that's all about cause and effect. And so you say, oh, well, I must have done something in another life, and then this happened. So does it mean I have to feel bad about myself, or what? We receive these pieces of spiritual information, but then it's not so easy to process it. And very often people process it incorrectly. And so I want to make sure that you keep in mind that there are things that are destined. There are things that happen because of karma, and there is you. And you are experiencing everything in the world through your senses. What you see, what you hear, what you come to know about, all of this reaches into your mind and your understanding through your eyes and ears, mostly. And so everything is going on in your mind. And that's really a very, very interesting angle to have on life, because it's going to really help you to face. So you know about something, you see something, you experience something which is on the outside of you, but you experience it on the inside. So we have to really have a sense of the outside and the inside, because both are going on. But all experiences that we all have are actually subjective, not really objective. Something may be happening, and all the people who are experiencing it will experience it slightly differently. They'll experience it from a slightly different angle. The way they're feeling in the first place will be slightly different from each other. So everyone's experience of that event will be personal. Some people will be able to handle it, other people will not be able to handle it. So the purpose of this session is to identify which ideas and concepts we can include in our inner world that's going to help us to face things that we can't face, or that we don't face, or that we don't want to face. Because to face things is to be in a position of power vis-a-vis those things. In psychology, when there is some sort of trauma or some sort of shock, then it is said that you fight, or you flight. Flight means to run away, or you freeze. So these are quite traditionally identified reactions to something that needs to be faced. So facing, instead of fighting or fleeing or freezing, is a very interesting approach. When you fight or flee or freeze, these are called reactions. So when you are reactive, you're not in command of the scenes that are there in front of you. So the purpose of this session is to see how we can shift that situation so that we face instead of react. So facing means what? It means that you capture in your mind this awareness. You bring it to the front of your consciousness, that whatever it is, is there because it's destined. And when you tell yourself it's destined, it means there's nothing you can do about it. So what people very often do is they try to make that situation not be. When there is a shock, an accident, someone dies suddenly or gets injured suddenly, there's so many thoughts of if only, I should have, they shouldn't have, it shouldn't be like this. We spend a great deal of time trying to change the facts and make them other than what they are. And we lose an enormous amount of energy by doing that. And when you lose energy, that means energy of your spirit, energy of your being, energy of your mind, it becomes very, very difficult to manage the consequences and the subsequent events that happen from that shocking situation. And all of the people who react and protest and create a big song and dance to respond to something that they don't like, they use a great deal of energy, and at the same time, it's very, very difficult to change the facts that are historical. Something has happened. So we need to make a distinction between has it happened or is it happening. So something that has happened, we can't do anything about. Something that is happening, we can do something about. And we have to be able to use our power to face, to act. If it's something that is happening, we have to face it and say, this is my position in regard to what is happening, and you bring to bear your willpower. So you're facing it head on, and you are rapidly coming up with a response, which is not a reaction. You're not fighting. You're not running away, you're not freezing. You're fast and you come up with a response. And this is part of the power to face. Now, if it's something that has already happened, it's no longer happening, it's a historical event. Even if it's a few hours or days, it's still no longer happening. So when it's no longer happening, then we have to arrive quickly at a mentality where we say, it happened. And there is a very wonderful expression that was told to me many, many years ago, which I think is really very helpful in such a situation. It happened, or it is happening, but it's not happening to me. That means you're creating a distance between yourself and the event. That means that you are using this other power that's connected to the power to face, is the power to be a detached observer. So it is happening, it happened, but it's not happening, or it didn't happen to me, it just happened. You see, when you say to me, you're caught up in it, you're involved, you're bound in the event, and that makes it very difficult to avoid reacting and fighting, flying away, or freezing. But when you just say it happened, then you have a choice. Do I have to do something? Can I do something? Or is it such that there is nothing I can do? You have to make the choice. And as quickly as you can make the choice, so much the better, because you save your spiritual energy. And for life, all the different aspects of life, we need energy, we need power to manage everything. So managing, handling, and facing, in some ways, it's all the same thing. Now let us come back to the idea of destiny, because we have to see these different concepts as working together, because we experience something that is on the one hand destined, on the other hand as a result of someone's act. There's the aspect of karma, and then there is you, your perception of it. How do you perceive it? What is your angle on this event? And the events come tumbling one after another very quickly a lot of the time. And they all have consequences, and people can be easily overwhelmed. And when there is this aspect of being overwhelmed, that's when you avoid, or you deny, or you say, it didn't happen, it's not happening, and you just go into that denial, and then you're in an unreal state, so that whatever you do would be, no matter what, be a negative karma. It wouldn't work. It would put you in a progressively worse situation where you have less and less control over your life. So we want to have control over our lives. That means we need to choose to face. So even if something is really unbearable, we have to face it anyway. And some people, they don't face because they have a belief that if it's unbearable, then don't even try to bear it, don't even try to face it, just go into running away, avoidance, denial, and then it'll all disappear, which of course it won't. So these are ideas that are surrounding us in our culture, in our world, in our life view, in our education. So we are predisposed to not face. And so we're in this session looking at our predisposition to not face, our predisposition to avoid, to blame, to find out why, to demand justice, all sorts of things which fritter away our energy and which cause us to go into a mode of consciousness where it really seriously weakens us in the midst of life. You can't avoid life. Life is what it is. And at the moment, it is not easy. I think there is no one who has a really easy time of it. There can be relationship issues, health issues, financial issues, circumstances. All sorts of things are going on, and no one can escape. So the power to face is really important. Okay, so what are the ingredients that we must start putting into our mixing bowl to create the power to face? So one of them is to see the difference between facing and then the reactions, which are fighting, flying away, or freezing. And so we have to make a choice in advance. Like it becomes a life policy that whatever happens, I will face it, I will not freeze, I will not avoid, I will not fight. So this is a choice, and so you're using your willpower for this, and you're doing it in advance of anything in particular happening, because you're dealing with your predisposition. So the predisposition is to not face. You're changing that by a decision, an internal decision where you say that whatever comes, I will face it. And as the days go by, things come, and you find that your old way of responding is not a response but a reaction. Are you a fighter? Are you a fleer? Are you a freezer? Well, you have to ask yourself this question, because you'll be one of them. Sometimes you may be one, sometimes and another time. But on the whole, we are quite creatures of habit. And so one of the aspects of spiritual practice and meditation is to observe oneself carefully and evaluate, choose, decide. Can you figure out, are you a person who likes to fight, who likes to run away, or who freezes over, gets paralyzed and does nothing? Or are you an avoider? Or do you stand and face it? There's a difference between facing and confronting. So when you confront as a fighter, then you engage in conflict, and that takes away your energy. So that's not advisable. But when you face it, like you say, okay, this is what it is, and it may be very bad, it may be very costly, it may have all sorts of repercussions. So evaluate it and see, okay, this is what it is. And then also notice the impact it has on you, because from being unbearable, we have to make it bearable. And when you make a decision in advance, make it a policy that I will face whatever comes, included in that is I will not relate to these events as that they are unbearable. I will relate to these events that they are bearable. So this brings in another of the spiritual powers, which is called the power of tolerance, and yet another which is called the power of accommodation. So these two are very helpful when you want to acquire the power to face, because you are right there in front of an unbearable situation. You have to be able to bear it, endure it. That means tolerate it. That it doesn't take you beyond your capacity for endurance, but you can handle it. And you practice this, and gradually your ability to endure increases. There's so many situations that you can practice with. And then you have to accommodate it. So accommodate it means that, okay, it is there. You have to live with it. It is part of you. It happened. And there it is. Still you say it happened, it didn't happen to me, but it happened, and I carry it with me. I bear the scars of it. I bear the trauma of it, and I bear it. Great warriors have plenty of scars. And in many ways we are spiritual warriors. We are dealing with life that is sometimes really a war zone. So this policy that you cultivate means that you are cutting away your predisposition to not face. And this is going to help you a great deal. Then you need to be able to work with the impact of something that happened. You see, because sometimes people just don't. That means you need to have a very broad and large heart, because things that happen to you affect you emotionally. And some people, they say, okay, I should not be emotional. And so they kind of freeze over their emotions, and then the trauma or the thing that has to be faced gets, you can say, stuck inside. And you have a section of your being where the energy isn't flowing. You're stuck. And so you're like looked down, looked in, looked away, and you're only partially there emotionally. And so this is quite damaging to the soul. And so the pain, the shock, the feelings of betrayal, the feelings of injustice, all of these have to be processed. And you need to have tools for processing these feelings. It's very important to acquire those tools. And again, the idea of everything being predestined is helpful in this. Suppose somebody does something to you, or you saw them do something very terrible to another person, and that had a very big impact on you. You have to process that. And normally people say, how could they? Why did they? I don't understand why. I don't understand how. This is not possible. And you get into a lot of thinking like this. And this thinking really drains away your energy and actually puts you into negative karma. So we have to take care of our karma very much, and especially at the level of thought and feelings. So if you say to yourself, whatever is happening, whatever is going to happen, however bad it is, I need to look at it that it's predestined. Why? Because then you can't say, I don't know why this happened. You know. It happened because it was destined. Then sometimes people say, how can bad things be destined? We only want to have good things destined. Bad things, somebody has to pay for it. But there are some bad things that are destined and some good things that are destined, because the world and life is all about good things and bad things. And every single one of us, we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. And every one of us has a role to play. And this is a very deep piece of spiritual information. Everyone has a role to play. And of course, everyone would like to be a perfectly good person with only good things and no bad things. We all would like that, but it's not like that. We work on our weaknesses, we cultivate our strengths, no doubt, but every so often something will happen and some really bad things happen. And you just need to say, this was destined. When you say to yourself, this was destined, what you're doing is you're what we call as applying a full stop. Because when you don't put a full stop, then you start having all these thoughts. Why did it happen? I don't understand how this could possibly happen. Who is to blame? What can I do to get justice? And you start going into fight or flight or freeze, or one of those modes which doesn't really get you anywhere. And so this idea of everything being destined is specifically to allow you to say, okay, stop. It happened. It was a terrible thing. Nothing I can do about it. Nothing anybody can do about it. If there is a culprit, the process of justice will take its course. But how are you in the middle of it all? Because whatever you do, you need to conserve your energy. You need to conserve your emotional balance. You need to conserve your sense of proportion and perspective, and understand that the times that we are going through happen to be times where everything is falling apart. That is also destined. Now, that's a very big thing to face, but it is said, as far as possible, slowly try to face that the dream, what they call the American dream or any other dream, seems to have turned into a nightmare, but we have to be able to handle nightmares just as well as we can enjoy dreams. We have to deal with nightmares, because if you're able to handle it, you can get through it. If you're not able to handle it, it will destroy you, spiritually, mentally, psychologically. And you do have the possibility to make sure that that doesn't happen if you learn about these methods, these perspectives, these ways of looking at people's behavior, circumstances, because out of that you will come through intact, and your peace of mind will be accessible to you quickly. You're able to recover more quickly from these big situations that happen. And I think above all, if you say to yourself, it was destined, then it stops you from blaming someone. If you blame someone in your mind, and it can go on for days and weeks and months and years even, you blame someone, you're creating very, very negative karmic bondage with that person. Well, on the other hand, if you say, okay, whatever it was destined, you stop all of that mental anguish and agony and agonizing. You stop it and you say it was destined. And then you don't blame. And then you don't lose your energy. And then you can get on with life. And also, you very subtly give that other person or those other people the opportunity to get themselves back together again. Because I think anyone who is seen to be the cause of any really bad action, there will always be some sort of a reason, some sort of a history that makes that behavior somehow inevitable. And it's not something you can control. It's not something you can change. It's not something that you can prevent. And so your only choice really is to say, it is what it is, and come to terms with it. So the power to face also includes this aspect of coming to terms with things that are happening or things that have happened. Because I think ultimately the place you want to arrive at is a place of acceptance, where you are okay with everything. And I think that in order to be really okay with everything, the first thing you have to be is okay with yourself. Because you do have jurisdiction over your own self. Nothing you can do about circumstances. In the Gita, it says, very interesting, this is a 5,000-year-old piece of literature. It says, circumstances arise, they persist for a while, and then they fall away. And that's it. That's circumstances. So we have the possibility, using the power to face, to not be under the sway of circumstances. That is very big power. And in that way you can get through circumstances, because they will not remain that way forever. They have a limited time span. And so you can also understand, in terms of developing your power to face, that you also have to be able to get through different circumstances and keep your perspective, keep your balance, keep your positive frame of mind, and stay in an integrated state as you get through these different circumstances. And the difficult circumstances that we all experience need to be looked at as opportunities to practice. Because what is the purpose of our existence? What's the point of an individual life? I think one of the points, maybe not the total, but one of the points is to become skilled. And another very wonderful statement that you find in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, yoga is skill in action. So skill in action means that you are able to handle all the things that happen. So skill in action means you have the power to face. You face it and then you act, or you do not act, because either you have to do something or you have to do nothing, and you need to know which is which at any given moment. And when you are a highly skilled human being, then you are free. And of course, there are all kinds of things that pull you and push you in every direction, but your aim is to be skilled and free and come through all of these things, as they say, smelling like a rose. That means you are right with yourself. You didn't do any negative karma because of some situation. So this is the great value, I think, of the power to face. And of course, the powers that we learn about in Raj Yoga are many, many, many powers. Skills, virtues, qualities, capacities. And so I think our whole life is all about increasing our capacity and becoming more and more skilled as a human being. Skilled in life, skilled in relationships, skilled in taking care of yourself, skilled in inspiring other people, skilled in creating benefit wherever you can, and just be really, really careful about your thinking, because this is the one thing that drains away our energy. There is one last thing I think that we need to use the power to face for, and that is to face your loneliness. I think people assume that if somebody is lonely, it's bad, and the solution is to get involved in some activities and just make sure that you're busy. because then you won't be lonely and then that'll be better. But the thing is that you are ultimately alone. And as you progress in life, you begin to realize that you have so many relationships, so many people, so many activities, but behind all that, you are alone. And so it's important to come to terms with that solitude, because each and every one of us, we live our lives ourselves, and we get born alone, and we die alone, and we pass through life alone. And there's a big difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is a very good thing, but to achieve the power of solitude, you need to be able to face your loneliness and overcome it. What is loneliness? It is an emotion that a person will feel when they are in the habit of depending on people, places, and things to feel okay. And that means that you're a dependent person, and that's a weakness. So we have to face that weakness as well. Of course, everybody has moments when they find themselves all alone, and then how do you feel? Can you stand it or can you not stand it? If you can stand it, if you can have this accumulated inner power where you say, it's okay, I'm alone, I will deal with this alone, I am with the Supreme Being anyway, and I am with myself, and I can face whatever is coming, and it is okay. You see, this is a really powerful circumstance or position to achieve. And every time you get these moments of loneliness or longer periods of loneliness, you need to use those as opportunities to develop your power to face your loneliness, your power to face these deep inner feelings or fears or whatever it is that you would call a loneliness and that you can't bear, because we must be able to bear that I stand alone, I go alone, I'm okay to be myself alone, and I am together with everyone, and at the same time I am alone. I am an independent human being, and I am right with myself. That means I have a good, clean, clear conscience, and I don't allow myself to go into negative thinking, waste thinking. All of that will drain away the energy. So these circumstances that are so horrific that are going on are all there to make us strong, to make us experience. Everything has a purpose, everything has a point, and we need to be able to find out what is the point of this and what is the point of that. Because once you've grasped the point and you've taken that situation to your advantage, then you cannot say it's a bad situation because you took benefit from it. Then it's all a matter of interpretation, but you cannot arrive at this kind of positive interpretation unless you face it full on, and deal with it, and take it as it is. So I think I will stop there and hand it over to Madhavi. Thank you very much.
Okay, accepted that everything is destined. But what to do if a misfortune happens to a very close relative and my flight overseas is scheduled the same day?
Well, this is where you have to have decision-making power. So you have to decide what is the right thing to do. And if something happens to a very dear relative, you consider the laws of karma, the rules of social interaction, and you weigh. On the one hand, you have a flight going somewhere. Is that more important? Or being there for your relative, is that more important? You have to decide what's more important.
Mm.
And ultimately, I think that relationships are very important. And whatever you decide, every time you do a good action, you pay a high price. This is a law that nobody knows about. They think it doesn't cost you anything to do the right thing. That's absolutely untrue. It costs you far more to do the right thing than to do the wrong thing. But the thing is, if you pay a high price to do the right thing, what you have is a very valuable thing that's with you. You know, if you pay a slightly lower price for doing the wrong thing, what you have is something that is going to distress you and that you will have to keep on paying for, and it ends up more expensive. But this is where you have to really be in solitude and say, okay, I am weighing these things as a detached observer, and look at your personal ethical policy and then make the choice knowing that you will have to pay a price and pay it anyway.
So Anne wants to know, what is the difference between consciousness and the intellect?
You know, the soul is very, very subtle, and all of the activities of the soul, that is what takes place in the mind and the understanding, all of consciousness, your emotions, your predispositions and personality traits, they all are described by lots of different words by different people. And so they're quite fuzzy in a way to separate off. And in India, a lot of attention has been given to dividing up different aspects of consciousness and calling it different things so that they can study it, which is really very helpful. So I think you could say consciousness is the whole thing of the soul. The soul is aware, the body is not aware. So consciousness is everything to do with the soul. If you look in the dictionary, consciousness will be described as a state of being awake as opposed to unconscious or asleep. So you're aware. And then the intellect, this is how we translate the word buddhi. And buddhi really refers to the power of your consciousness to evaluate and calculate. It also includes the conscience. It includes the ability to know the difference between true and false, as well as like morally right and wrong. And for that you need to have good and accurate information. So the intellect is the ability of the soul to know the difference between what is real, what is not real, what is true, what is untrue. And there, in terms of the powers, we have this power of discrimination. So the buddhi is really about discrimination. And people don't like the word discrimination because they think it means racial discrimination or gender discrimination. But discrimination means that you can tell the difference. And of course, it's very, very subtle. And the process of studying and meditating is a refinement of your process of understanding. and becoming more and more subtle in distinguishing one thing from another. If you evaluate a person on the basis of their skin color, it means you don't have a very good power of discrimination. If you evaluate someone on the basis of their gender, it means you don't have a very good power of discrimination. So you're discriminating on the basis of something that you shouldn't be discriminating on the basis of, you see. So that is the intellect.
Okay, so Jackie wants to know, she says, I'm confused between the power to face and the power to accept. Can you unpack that a bit, please?
I think the power to face is a power, but acceptance is not a power. Acceptance is the final result of the application of the powers. So I wouldn't call acceptance a power. The power to face I described, so I already told you about that. But acceptance is what you arrive at when you have done all your work, and then you're at peace with everything.
There is a situation that happened to my son. He has not been able to accept it, though I have accepted it. How do I help him to accept that situation?
If you've accepted it, that's very good, because whatever happens to you influences your child, whether they're close or not close, physically or even emotionally. Because a person sometimes just needs time to process it and life experience to arrive at acceptance. You can't force it on anyone. So just be with him and let him experience that you've accepted it and that you're okay with it, and that itself will help him to come to terms with it. But let him take his time.
So Valentina is asking, she says, I'm not sure who said there is not a good or bad destiny, but everyone has one to fulfill. Our willpower is to react to the events, but the mind rebels and wants to control and justify. What can we do to help ourselves? And also in our meditation to help the mind to accept the truth.
That's not the mind doing that, that's the intellect. All the argumentation that goes on inside you, that's the intellect. The mind is your feelings. The mind is like a sense organ that's not a physical sense organ. And the word mind is very often used for the intellect, and so that's why people get it mixed up quite easily. So it's really a matter of maybe using different words, because when you use words inaccurately, then you lose the meaning of what that thing is. You lose contact with what that thing is. So yeah, there are different parts of yourself which come into conflict. Some of it is a difference between your assumptions of what should be and the reality of what is, and you don't accept it, you don't like it, you don't agree with it. So there's an inner conflict going on, and that's the intellect doing all that. And then the feelings and reactiveness, that's the mind, but it's very, very subtle. The mind, the intellect, the sanskaras, everything all works together.
So Rhoda is saying, I am confused. I am understanding that what happens is destiny, and my free will is how I deal with the situation. But if our thoughts create our future, it means I create my destiny, or not.
Well, no. Destiny is there. You don't create your destiny. It is already there. And one of the ways that you can relate to it is you can look at it as like possibilities or potentials, and then you use your free will to make it a reality. And the word destiny is interesting because how people think of destiny often is a sort of peak point in someone's life, that they reached a great height and they say, okay, that's their destiny. But actually, their destiny is the whole thing. And your free will operates only at the moment of time called the present moment, which lasts for about 1 second. And so this is why it's pretty important to be in the moment, to be in the present, and not be caught up in the past and the future, which many people are, and then you miss the present, and then you can't really apply your free will, because when you're not present for the present, then you're on automatic pilot, which means you're going according to your karmic accounts. And then you're not really using your free will as it could be. And some negative thing can take over, which otherwise you could deal with. I mean, these things are very paradoxical, and there are not very many people who can handle paradox, because you have to be able to hold the destiny which is there and your free will, which only has 1 second in which to act. And if you miss that second, then you have to deal with the next second. And this is very subtle.
You emphasize processing the feelings and emotions. Can you expand it a bit more, please?
You need to spend time with yourself individually on a daily basis, and talk to yourself about what you feel and how you feel, and then look at it in the light of the spiritual knowledge, and put it in perspective. I think it's very important to not be just cold and analytical, but it's also very important to be not just feeling this and feeling that all over the place. We have a mind where the feelings are experienced. We have an intellect which processes, and the two must work together, because all of this is about understanding yourself, understanding your experience, coming to terms with everything. I personally really study the spiritual information, because with that you can make sense of everything. And to me, if you can make sense of everything and then lay it to rest and come to terms with it, that's very good. I think it's very important to be able to conserve your energy, especially in terms of thought, by not going off into these endless streams of what if and why not and why and who did and who didn't and should and shouldn't and all of those things. So that's very negative, because it uses up your energy and it doesn't get you anywhere.
Raisa is saying, would you please share a few ways or tools to make the intellect strong and accurate?
Well, I think the best way of all ways is to study the spiritual material carefully and systematically. And that's what I do, and it has really helped me to have a good, clear, logical, coherent methods of thinking and dealing with things. So, it's a treasure, it's a great treasure. And this is what I would do. And also give time to meditate, because meditation doesn't mean, floating off on a pink cloud somewhere. Meditation means think deeply about what is worth thinking about and arrive at clarity. That's meditation. So, the power to face. First of all, go deep inside and affirm to yourself that you are invincible. No one can kill you. The soul is immortal. No one can corrupt you. You are a pure soul, and you plan on keeping it that way. No one can break your spirit. You are a detached observer, and you watch the games, all the good and the bad that happens. You take it in your stride. Hand in hand with the light, you move forward. The ups and the downs are all okay. You are right with yourself. You do not blame anyone. You do not lose your time and energy endlessly thinking about this or that. Who did what to whom? Stay in your power. You are the light. You are with the light. And whatever happens, it's okay. You move on. You pass through. You move beyond. Always intact. Always right with yourself. Keep the heart clean and the conscience clear. And the rest, put it into the hands of God. Om Shanti.